Hi, this is Deborah, your instructor, and in this video I'm going to demonstrate how to take a long document and build an automatic index page at the end of the document. Here you see on my screen a manual or handbook. This is something that I wrote a few years ago for a school district when they wanted to train their personnel on how to use a program called eProcurement. So as I go through the document, you'll see that it has a rather full table of contents, and then it gets into the chapters. And there's about 100 pages here on in this book. And so what I want to do is go through and decide which pages I want to include, or which parts of pages I want to include in my index at the end. Now you know that an index is a listing of very specific topics and what page you can find them on, whereas a table of contents has much broader information. It'll show you where a chapter starts or a certain section of the book might begin, but the index is a good thing to use to find specific items or topics. So let's start with this. Let's say that I want to put in my index a marker on how to find this page exactly. How does eProcurement work? So before I can build the index page, I have to go through the document and choose the text I want to have, the specific topics in the index, and I have to place a marker or tag on that text, on all of those pieces of text. And what that is a code that Word inserts next to the text that you want to include. So let's say that I want, how does eProcurement work? I want that in the index. So the first thing I'm going to do is click and drag to select that phrase. The next thing I'm going to do is go to the References tab here at the top, and in the index group over here, there's a button called Mark Entry. So I'm going to click Mark Entry, and what happens is the Mark Index Entry dialog box comes up on the screen, and here is where I get to make the choices about how to use this entry and how I want it to display in the index page. Now, because I highlighted the text, it automatically puts it in for me here into the dialog box. And I'm just going to leave it as a main entry. This is going to be a basic index. Now, I have other options here I can choose, but the most common one that we use is this one, current page. You can, if you want to get complex, you can use cross-references or a page range, but in this video I'm sticking with the default, which I think is a lot easier to use, just the current page. Now down here, in the index page, you can decide whether the page numbers that are displayed are bold or italic. Let's say I want to make them italic. Okay, so now the next thing I'm going to do is click Mark. This button here that says Mark is like the OK button to make this happen. So I'm going to go ahead and click that. And notice that when I clicked it, this dialog box did not disappear. It stays here on my page for as long as I want it. If I don't want to use it anymore, I can click Close here or the red X. But I am going to be making additional marked index entries, so I do want it to stay. And notice too that here where I had highlighted the text that I wanted to include, it now has a code that exists next to it. Now you'll notice that the code seems to be displayed twice. There's a double code, and that's because I had already marked it in an earlier demonstration. Now I don't want it to show up twice in my index, and this might be something you should look for when you're doing index pages. In case you had marked something and forgot about it and now you're marking it again, make sure that this code only appears once. So right about now I'm going to delete or backspace to remove that extra code, and this is the only one I want. And of course it has the markings, it's between brackets, and it has certain characters in it that Word will recognize as something you want to include in the index page. So now I'm going to move this over here, and I'm going to start scrolling through the page to find additional pieces I want in my index. And as I do that, notice that as I click the scroll bar, my mark index entry box goes pale. Now that just means it's not active right now, but it hasn't disappeared. So I can continue to scroll through my document and make sure you will also notice too, let me get to the right place I want to be. You might be interested to know that when you mark an index entry and you can see the codes in it, that's because it turns on the Show Hide button. The Show Hide button is on the Home ribbon, Home tab, and it's this little backwards looking P figure. And when that Show Hide button is turned on, it will display all of the non-printing characters in your document. For example, this little backwards P icon means that I pressed the Enter key at that line. If you see little tiny dots like these in between the words, each little dot indicates that I pressed the spacebar key, which of course you do in between words as you type. So those are the non-printing characters, and there are a lot of other types of non-printing characters too, but I'm not going to get into that in this video. So again, let's say that this is where I want an index entry to be marked. What is a chart field? So I'm going to click and drag what is a chart field. And now look what happens when I go back over here to the Mark Index Entry dialog box and I just click anywhere on the box. It picked up the words that I highlighted. And I'm going to keep the default settings here and here to make sure that my index page is consistent all the way through. I'm not going to change any of that. So now I'm going to click Mark. And there is the code, the invisible code, to bring that into the index page. So now I'm going to scroll down some more and find another piece I want in the index. Perhaps I want to include this terminology. It's called fund code. That's something that people deal with when they handle budgets and that sort of thing, especially in a government job situation like a school district. So I'm going to select that. But before I do, look at my Mark Index Entry box. It still shows the last index entry that I had marked. So look what happens when I select a new one. I'm going to click and drag Fund Code, and then I'm going to click somewhere, anywhere on this dialog box, and it automatically switches it out for the newest selection. And of course I'm not making any other changes, so I'm going to click Mark. And there it is. It kind of shifts the page up. I'm not sure why it does that, but this is the code. So that phrase, fund code, will be included in the index. Let me just do a couple, maybe just one more. Maybe express item entry. So I'm going to, again, I'm going to use my Mark entry box, Mark Index Entry box, and I'm going to select, click and drag that phrase, click on the box to bring it over there, and then click Mark to mark it. So here it is marked with the code. Now, let's say that's all I want to do for now. I'm going to scroll all the way down to the bottom of the page, and you'll notice that I inserted a page break right here. A page break allows you to create a brand new blank fresh page immediately following the page you're on. Even if you're in the middle of a page and the text ends and you want to start the next text on a blank new fresh page, you just press Control and the Enter key on your keyboard, Control plus Enter, and that will make a page break and you get a whole new brand new piece of paper. Now, for an index, you really should do that because, like a table of contents, an index should be on its very own page at the end of the document. So I'm done with the Mark Index Entry dialog box. I can close that out. I don't even need to have the Show Hide button going. So now I'm going to click down here and I'm going to create my index. So to do that, I have to go back to the References ribbon, the References tab, and back over here to the Index group. And I don't want to mark entries anymore. I want to insert a whole index. So I click that, and it offers me a preview of the default style, if you will, of the kind of how it will look. But I can choose other things. I can choose a different look to it. There's several different styles you can use. And you can also make other choices here if you want to, how many indents you want, if you want sub index marks or entries there, you can do that. I'm just going to stick with the actual default settings. I'm going to go with, not the modern one, I'm going to go with formal. And just click OK down here at the bottom. And there's my index. As you can see, I have a lot more index entries here than the ones that I did during this video. But you can see at least one of the ones that I did in this video. Here it is, a practice exercise special request service. As you can see, I have a lot more index entries here than the few that I did created during this video, but you can see one of the ones I created during the video. Here it is right here under the F category. We generally indexes are alphabetized, so it's easier to find topics. So if I'm looking up a fund code, where is the fund code information in this book? Oh, it's on page 15. Okay. It doesn't tell me what chapter it's in or which section it is. It just says you can read about fund codes on page 15. So that tells me I can scroll up to find it in page 15. So that's basically it. And if you wanted to create a title at the top, you could try to move things down and put a title in here if you wanted to. Another thing to notice too, that if you single click anywhere in the index, it will instantly highlight the whole thing, and then you can right click on that and you can choose update field, and what that will do is it will instantly adjust your index to make the pages and any editing that you might have done adjust correctly. Let's say you create the index and then you go back into the book and you make some changes, maybe you delete some pages. Well, now your index has to be recreated, right? No, it doesn't have to be recreated. All you have to do is go down here and right click and click update field, and it will instantly update the index to reflect any changes you made in the book or in the document.